Sederunt, and apologies, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have 5 members present, and there have been changes to membership since the frontis was published. I have been advised that Councillor Nicholson is putting in his apologies. However, Councillor Scobie was going to come along and substitute. He may be along later in the meeting. And Councillor Wilson has replaced Councillor Sloan. Everything has been submitted on time for these in relation to these changes. And Councillor Crothers is not present but may be along later in the meeting.
Stephen, did you have a comment?
Sorry, just for a clarification there, who's the actual member on the committee? I appreciate Councillor Wilson's now on in replacement of Councillor Sloan, but you mentioned both Councillor Scobie and Councillor Nicholson. Who's the actual member of the committee?
Councillor Nicholson is the actual member. However, Councillor Scobie was going to substitute today. He's not present, but he may be along later.
Thank you for that clarification. Andy?
Through you, Chair, yes, as this is a subcommittee, so standing orders do allow for this.
Did you have another comment, Andy? Yes, Ivor.
Chair, my understanding is this is a subcommittee of full council, so any member can substitute in the political groupings.
Okay, thank you. So, good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the review of the Standing Orders Subcommittee. As members will be aware, there's been a significant change in the Council's organisational management structure over the last couple of months. And at full council at the end of March, members agreed a review of committee structures and delegation to align decision making with the new structure. This subcommittee has been tasked with this work and to report in June to full council. We have scheduled 3 meetings in order that we can fully explore this topic and have time to discuss and debate. I have also been clear that all members are welcome to attend and to participate in each meeting. It's such an important part of our work that we need to get it right, and I would like all members who wish to contribute to be offered the opportunity to do so. As elected members, we have a unique opportunity to shape and influence how we want to deal with the Council's business in a way that makes efficient and effective use of our time, but also allows us to spend time understanding the complex issues that demand our attention. So thank you to everyone for coming along today, and please feel free to share your ideas and thoughts for improvement. We have staff here to take good notes, and we're also recording the meeting. Today, we're going to decide what is in scope for us to look at as part of the review, and also to let you speak freely and about what options you wish officers to consider and to research and bring back to us. Officers have helpfully framed a report to guide us in our discussions. However, I would stress that this is simply to help us and need not feel restricted or limit our discussions to what's in the paper if we have other ideas that are relevant to the debate. So on that point then, I'd just like to ask if anyone has a declaration of interest. Okay, so we will go on to item 3. Sorry, Will.
Could I just say, and grateful you did say at full council that everybody was, the invitation was extended to all 43, so really grateful for that, Rose. For the rest that I'm substituting just now for Ronnie Nicholson.
Thank you. We clarified that, and thank you for the clarification, Willie. So moving on to item 3, which is the review of committee structures and the report by the Director of Economy and Resources. So the purpose of the report is to provide members with information to aid their review of committee structures and delegations, and with a view to align decision-making and oversight with organisational management. And we're being asked to consider the suggested principles for the review set out at paragraph 4.1, which could provide an initial focus for committee debate, and 2.2, to consider the points raised at paragraphs 4.2 to 4.5 and offer views for further development by officers to be discussed at the next 2 scheduled meetings of this subcommittee. So members, I open up the floor for your debate. I'll start then. So, I was looking at 4. Sorry, I've just lost my way for a minute. 4.3 members, and I was looking at the discussion about frequency of meetings and the bulk of business. And I totally appreciate that the amount of business that comes to committee can be very slow and laborious. But I think my opinion on this point is that we do have an incredibly huge rural region, and I would be concerned about putting extra meetings into the schedule and the frequency of journeys. We're trying to save the planet as well. We need to be cutting down on mileage, and I think we should just consider that when we're looking at increasing our meetings. I'm not saying I don't agree with it, but I think we just need to bear in mind all kinds of factors when we're looking at increasing frequency of meetings. Adam.
Sorry, Chair, I should maybe say this at the beginning. In terms of going through the report, I think that there's a number of considerations and there's a number of clear areas where members need to make a decision. I just wondered if we could maybe go through that order and then we can sort of, do members agree with this principle? We can sort of agree them one in turn in order if that's okay.
Ian.
I suppose, you went to 4.3, you've kind of outlined that bit, but maybe it is appropriate just going through the stats at 4.1 and it's highlighted in bold, isn't it? Maybe we should go in each question, leave that to you, Chair, but going back to the point you're just making yourself, frequency of meetings in particular, I just wonder what benefit would there be to having more frequent meetings, more of them? To me it's a bit more better decision making process that we have in place through the committee structure, that is, because that's what we're talking about here, and how do we best apply good decision making. And I think more meetings doesn't necessarily meet that, I don't think, so I'd be tending to agree with yourself when it comes to more meetings. Is there any value in that? Probably not.
I think probably you're right, and we'll go through each point in turn, and perhaps that will be teased out as we approach each item on the agenda. So with your agreement then, I think we understand the background if we look at point 3. So let's go to point 4, and reflecting on previous reviews and learning from those initial principles that we may wish to adopt in focusing initial discussions are as follows. So I think if we could have a look at whether we agree with the principle written out in 4.1 and what considerations there may be regarding service committees aligning with the new service organisation. So if we also look at a new committee structure which would be implemented subject to decisions made at full council. So Willie, do you have a point to make?
Yeah, Chair, what does that sentence mean? To amend committees to another model that does not complement clear reporting and accountability would retain or add to complexity. I think it were no departing from that, the accountability.
What we were simply trying to say, apologies if it's not come out that way, is, at the moment, if we keep the committees that we've got, but have the organisational structure that we've just put in, then officers are going to be reporting to a number of committees, and it's not going to be clear where some of the business is going to be done. So a head of service might be 1 week at communities, and they're at, economy and resources, and we're trying to streamline so that the committee structure reflects the new services and where they are, so that you don't make it overly complex.
Chair, maybe Rona could give us an example. I know we've got EEI as it is just now. It deals in communities and so what are we saying in here? And we've got SIPL that does with education and social work.
So if you look at the appendix, it's maybe a wee bit more clear there that, yes, so at the moment you've got an EE&I committee, but you're not going to have an EE&I directorate anymore, and those services have been split between the Director of Communities and the Director of Economy and Resources now. So where's that business going to be done? Are you going to keep that committee, or are you going to move it to the delegations to other places where they might sit? Because if Derek's got roads, and if Lorna's got sort of economic development, that should be in their own committees rather than a separate one.
Does that mean there's going to be more committees then, or less?
Ian?
I wonder if I could just ask a question, because when I read that, as it's been explained, is how I took it in, but there's complexity sits above that in regards to senior positions within the council, and that's where I just wondered, how did that tie in? So for senior members of the council, this doesn't actually fit. The status quo fits, but to change it and align it to the new directorship probably doesn't fit. So I thought, well, there's actually an arrangement, but they would really need to see it. That maybe would teased out and come out in the next report. Is my understanding. So take your example that you just gave. So you've got Councillor Driver sits as chair of the Economy and Infrastructure. Actually, that director has now been split between communities and between Derek and Lorna in real terms. So now so where does Archie sit? Archie still has a place, I think, and there's still a senior position there. So if you kind of set that to the side, but it's kind of Archie's position is still there. It is, absolutely is. You've got the amount of senior councillors within the council. That's how many need to run the council, so on and so forth. So therefore, it doesn't sit neatly with what's possibly being proposed. So I think there's maybe some work to be teased out there, or is there? Maybe we should just be moving to a senior councillor, end of, and whatever role they take at that time, they take over. I did quite a bit of thought about that. How does it work? How could it work? It'd be quite broad, or you can keep it just the status quo as it is. Keep going on, keep the senior councillors, same places, same positions, but in report that mechanism might make it a wee bit more awkward for officers or officials. But I still, both can work, I think. Because we haven't seen the new example, we didn't see that in front of us. For me, it's quite difficult to perceive and conceive that.
Oh, sorry, Adam.
No, I mean, it's a consideration, absolutely, but I think I would argue that actually, in terms of senior councillors, the positions and the people who fill them, it's actually the very end of the process. I think that actually the main thing is to get the correct structure, because essentially any councillor could be, voted at full council to hold those positions, and they come at the very end of the process. Of course, it's the last time that we restructured the council, there has been, cuts of 20, 30 million. Do we actually need how many senior council positions that we've got? There is maybe an opportunity to reduce them and contribute to the savings targets. But I think that I think that Ian raises a valid point, but actually I think that comes at the very end of this process. Once we've actually agreed these principles, I think that certainly on this bullet point, more than happy to agree with that principle. If you've got a service, I'm thinking of that sort of the waste management. It currently reports to EEI. If we were to retain EEI, you could have the bizarre situation where you've got the business going to EEI, but the budget being reported to communities. We need to make sure that proper scrutiny is in place, that proper monitoring is in place, so that I'm thinking at the moment as well, SIPL and social work. Where you can have social work members who are not necessarily seeing the budget or the business plan because it keeps going to SIPL. And that's not very good scrutiny at the moment. So I don't think we want to see that type of thing taking place after we complete this exercise. So certainly I'm more than happy to agree with that principle.
Richard?
Yes, well, I think the principle of aligning the committees with the services, that makes complete sense. there's going to be just as much business now. I think maybe there's room for two committees like Economy and Resources and Communities as well. So I think we need to flesh that out and see what the options are. Have a range of options before us on that one.
Yeah, Ivor.
Chair, I've been through one or two of these reorganisations, and what you actually find is, well, I was being kind. What you find is you put things because that's the new directorate, and then you find that you've actually made a problem over here because you didn't see that actually that should have been reported with this. Is there any way that we could do an exercise prior to the next meeting where we take the agendas, not the papers, but just the agendas from last year and brigade them into where they would be in a future year? Because you could actually end up with a committee that's got 43 items to be discussed on a Wednesday morning because we don't want another meeting that week. And you could have another committee that's sitting with 2 items on a Wednesday morning because that's all the business that's there. So is there some way we could maybe get an idea of what the implications of this could be going forward by looking back and saying, well, actually, if you'd lined it up in the two committees, this would all have been here and that would have all have been there. And then it gives us an idea, because it might be a case of, well, actually it will work, or actually, if you report that there, what happens about this situation? Because was it housing was one that used to cause us a bit of an issue because some of it was in social work and some of it was in communities. And you had to try and merge the two. But then housing actually has a bit in planning because they need to influence planning decisions going forward as to where we need houses. So that was the kind of thing. We can actually split them up, yes, easy enough done. You're in charge of this, so therefore it reports there, but actually it has an effect on another committee. So could we maybe brigade them, I think they call it, to show us where we are so that in the future we don't put unintended consequences in place?
No, that's certainly possible. We did that, I think, for the last time. We did the scheme of delegation just to show. So quite happy to do that. And I think another thing I could perhaps put is where reports were just for noting, because I think I had a lot of complaints over the period about, one of the committees just becoming too big in terms of agenda, and a lot of the reports were for noting. And I think that's something we might want to think about going forward, that we should maybe make sure the agendas are not too big by removing, some are necessary noting, but there was a lot of, I think, unnecessary noting reports went to some of the committees.
Willie?
Yeah, Chair, and I think Ivor's highlighting some of the complexities, and he says he's been at 1 or 2 changes. I don't know how many changes we've had over the piece. And the one that springs to mind, that it says SIPL here. Well, SIPL used to be the Education Committee, and the Education Committee at that time had one director, that looked after education and social work, and it was one committee. And all the reports went there. So it touches on the point that Adam has made in terms of you then got to look at the whole, but it was one committee. And then it was deemed, well, maybe that's too much for the director, so then we split it. And it was the chief social worker, not as a director, but then had the separate committee and reported to social work. So that's one. And I think we do need to look, so there are complexities here, and the appendix is just, well, delete EEI. Well, in doing so, do we really get the proper structure? Because, Ivor went on to speak in terms of housing. Well, housing in the last administration then fell under, I believe, was it? Yeah, and it got a separate subcommittee that was a standing committee just to deal with housing issues. So, there is no, in this one, as to where that type of business fall. Does it fall between 2 stools, and, well, somewhat's here and somewhat's there. So there are complex issues that aren't just highlighting hence the reason that what does it mean to the first bullet point on 4.1. I think accountability is important, but this one's suggesting, increasing the numbers on each of the committees.
Thank you, Willie. Andy?
Chair, I don't know how you want to take this, because obviously the committee have got first speak at everything, so I've been sitting waiting to see if they're all finished. If they are, if I could maybe add just a couple of things to consider. Personally, I'm looking at the service committees and their delegations should reflect the new service organisation. That's absolutely crucial, not just from the elected members' point of view, because it's very easy for us to do that. The staff need to know. Right? The staff need to know who they're reporting to. They need to know who their manager is. Right? Who's going to come chatting at their office door if they've not done it right. They need to understand all that. So that would be critical for me. And in terms of subcommittees, I'm not a believer in subcommittees. But what I think we would need to do is build in some flexibility into the delegations before council, allow the chairs, vice chairs in consultation with leader, deputy leader and other group leaders or however you want to do it, to call extra meetings, because rather than having a 30 agenda item, which is just nonsense, you could effectively have, if that cycle's business is particularly heavy, call an extra meeting to have that. That's different than setting up a subcommittee which has got to meet by, and sometimes, as we've seen in the past, discuss nothing. Right? Get updates on where we were for the time before. So we're at a time here when the public are watching how we spend their money. Right? We need to make sure that we comply with that as well. So I would suggest that you could potentially go with, as long as we align and reflect the structure and the delegations with the service area, that sorts the staff out, that gives them clear direction, clear leadership from the top, right? And allow the chairs working with others flexibility to actually call extra if need be. Because I think just now, and I think William, we had a real discussion in 2012, it would be they go from 2 monthly meetings to 1 monthly meetings in some committees. And I think if circumstances dictate it, then that's essentially what you could do, right? So, as I say, not the one I'm currently in, but the one that Lorna's got to inherit, and you've got the LDP2 coming up, right? Would that be a single item agenda? Almost certainly, yes. And it's big issues like that. We just need that flexibility built in, I would suggest.
Thank you, Andy. So it sounds like a structured but flexible way forward. So, Katie, and then Ian.
I'm happy to let the members of the committee speak first, and then I'll come in afterwards.
Okay, so Katie, then Ian, then Stephen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to attend today and actually to speak at the meeting. My question, or it's not really a question, but it's an observation. We're talking about, or you as a committee are looking at the new committee structures that are going to be implemented. And as a side to that, I'm aware that this committee was going to be looking at potentially video conferencing. And I'm wondering, is that going to be inbuilt into the new committee structures? Now, I appreciate we may not have the facilities within this building to be able to do that. However, I'm wondering if there's any provision for future that we could perhaps use some of our other buildings that have got provision. I'm thinking of the bridge, for example. If we've got technology there, I'm wondering if there's a possibility for it to be used. And it's just whether this is the opportunity when you're looking at the restructure of whether there's an opportunity to push this forward, really. So it's more a sort of a request for consideration rather than any suggestions as such.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've obviously been working quite hard to try and find some solutions for the video conferencing that we suggested and agreed. It's proved a bit more difficult than we thought. However, there obviously will be an opportunity with the refurbishment of this building. When that work takes place, we'll have to move out anyway and be in other places, as well as come back and hopefully have modern technology that would allow us to do much more with video conferencing or Skyping. I know that there's a proposal to try and put some technology in each of the group rooms to start off with, and that was discussed last week, that hopefully people will be coming to speak to the different groups about that, to get technology in the rooms. Doesn't solve the problem about the meetings yet, but we're working with colleagues in BTS to try and find a way forward as quickly as possible.
Ian?
Thank you, Chair. If we're agreeing the principle at 4.1, which I think is probably the right way to go forward, but we're just agreeing the principle. It's not, it can't be it's not bendable, it's flexible later on. I ever spoke about brigading with the committees, how they work, the crossovers, the overlaps, so on and so forth. Is that timetable a wee bit too tight? Maybe, possibly. And probably the third point, just when I'm still here, the removal of the Enterprise Services Subcommittee. Come back to the point Wally's just made. I always got to make a point about procurement. I've made that in the past. Is there an opportunity to ask about subcommittees that are of relevance, just to put it out there, so when stuff's coming up, when we get reports back, I'm very strongly for a procurement committee. At least let's have a look at that. And if Wally's saying housing's another option, can we have a look at it when it comes back? So at least we can then consider the fullest of options. Thanks, Chair.
Certainly, the next meeting's not too far away, but I think what I'll try and do is, I think it's perfectly possible if officers did the last 6 months even, and if we get the time, we'll do the full year, but we'll certainly give you some idea of how it looks for the next committee. I'll get a couple of people to work on that this week. And we'll certainly note the idea of the procurement committee.
Stephen?
But actually, I got this out. One sec. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so I'm just thinking for 4.1 anyway, the principle is probably okay, but it's a wee bit sort of back to front, because it strikes me the meat and veg of this subcommittee is to do with reviewing the scheme of delegation. And the delegations to the new structure of the service organisations should be as per the proposal as put forward. So whenever we looked at that full council, clearly there's a move to have those delegations within maybe new service groupings in the organisation, and then the committee should follow from that. What we seem to be doing is taking what we've got already, thinking we should move some of the delegations about from there to there, rather than saying, well, let's just look at the delegations and where they belong in the new structure, and then base the committees around how they're going to fulfil the scrutiny function of those delegations in that way. I mean, that would seem to be the logical forward-moving step, because then you could have a look at the actual delegations as well, because members may want to actually think, well, are we still sure that everything we've delegated to officers, or everything that could be delegated to officers is still delegated to officers, or shouldn't be delegated to officers any longer, for example? Because it might be that if we were to look at where do we scrutinise, and we've just talked about it, digital technology within the council as a basis for a sort of digital infrastructure for service delivery, we can't scrutinise that anywhere in the current structure, and it's not clear from the delegations as migrating to the new organisational structure where that would sit, or how that would be scrutinised, whether by subcommittee, as a committee of its own, or whether it should be delegated to officers, or what. Similarly with housing's been touched on, and also likes of property services. So if we are talking about all the activity that happens with this council that members see but don't necessarily determine at committee, we just get noting reports back on, yeah, we've done that, and everybody has to get out of that building, and suddenly we've got loads of spare buildings. But I mean, that might be something worth reviewing as well. So I think we should, the scope, I mean, if we're talking about the scope, which you started out, maybe the scope should extend to what's delegated and what isn't delegated, and that aspect as well.
I think though that there's got to be, yeah, I think it's all possible, but I think we've got functions that have been reorganised through the restructure, and the delegations to committees is a different thing from the delegations to officers. I mean, at the moment, the delegation to officers have been changed just simply to let the business be done, because if people are getting their delegations from different places, so there's been a bit of but just being pragmatic about that. However, I think there will be a time in June when we need to bring back both the scheme of delegation to the committees and the scheme of delegation to officers, so that you can see where it all lies now. I think those things do tend to get presented together.
Or, I appreciate there is a difference between specific functions that are delegated to officers and the delegation to committees, as it were. But even seeing that here, as in here's the current, even as an appendix, it would have been helpful, and maybe for the next one, here's the current delegation to committees, which we'll all have seen in the inside of the papers, or the frontises for all the committees and subcommittees we sit on, but to have them all in one piece and then map that, if you like, visually, if not, so we can have something in front of us to discuss, because in the way it's presented in the list here, I think, although it sets it out, I think it would be more helpful, because this is like saying, this is what we've got now, this is what we might need to tweak, rather than in the spirit of transformation, if you like, which is another strand of how we take the council forward. Here's what we need to achieve, and here's the delegations, and here's how we could map them into things, and then maybe get a sense of what Ivor's point, which was interesting, was like, what would the volume of the business then look like within that new structure, and also how would you get into the detail required for certain areas of specialism, because the volume might be small, but the detail might be great, in certain things, and that's where you'd get sort of specialist subcommittees. So I think there's the looking backwards way of doing it, and then there's a looking forward way. And this appears to me to be just a presentation on this is what we do now, and this is what we did before. How could we take that forward, rather than there's where we want to get to. How do we need to set ourselves up to get there? So that's maybe just something for writing down. I don't know, but
we've actually done most of the work on that already, and it was planned to bring that to either the second or the third meeting, of hopefully the second one, that we have, Nick, Lorna and myself have all looked at the scheme of delegation, and we've tracked the changes through it, so it would be visible. You can see what's been taken out of different committees and moved to others, so I don't think that's too difficult. And as you say, it's just approaching it from a different angle. We've approached it from what committees do you want, and then we'll put the delegations under them. But if you want to see the delegations first, then we can bring that to the next committee.
Richard and then Willie.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I agree with the old brigadier there, Councillor Hislop, that we and it would also cover Councillor Thompson's point. We can look over the past agendas, see where they sit in the new structure, and scrutinise them to see if any of the functions need to be delegated to officers. But we've been through that process before, so it would be for consideration. I think Councillor Crothers moved on to the next bit, which was, do members agree with this, the June timetable? It's good to see that the council are moving swiftly. So, but whether this is realistic, I don't know. But so I would encourage us to get it sorted out by June, but we maybe need more time. And somebody mentioned the Enterprise and Services Subcommittee. Do the members agree with the removal of this committee? We discussed it at the Liberal and Independent group this morning, and our representative of that committee said that the committee would have functioned better if it had been given the information which it requested but didn't get. And it's taking the debate on a bit further. The enterprise and stuff has been going to be done in the new system under. Each committee is going to look at the enterprise and part, but you need somebody overall in overseeing that, whatever we do.
Willie and then Adam.
Yeah, I'm picking up on what Stephen was saying there in terms of, I think he said IT, but scrutiny or monitoring, whatever phrase you used there, and it's looking at the whole scheme of delegation. And I can go back many years, maybe even before Richard, whether to one of the Lib Dem councillors that championed the whole idea of decentralisation. And what we've done, and I keep reading, about frequency of meetings and everything else. Maybe, we've become the centralised system where there is no decision making lying at the level of area committees. So maybe it's something that we should be reviewing now in terms of what's the area committee's roles and responsibilities, and introducing decision making. But again, to decentralisation, that may cut down the number of times or the frequency of meetings. So I think we've got to look at that in the round as well, in terms of what is the area committee's function on the decentralisation. And I'll come on to the more frequency in the item that you're talking about, Ross.
Can we put that area committees on as well? Thank you.
So one of the points I was going to make, it probably fits better in the frequency of meetings. So I was just going to say, essentially those 3 bullet points in 4.1, I'm quite happy to say, to agree to the principles, to agree to the removal of that committee, and to agree with the timetable in terms of the change. I think sort of summer recesses are it's probably enough time, I think, given the sort of conversation at the Transformation Board last week as well, that there was sort of an urgency to say, to think about budgets and the budget setting process for next year. Essentially, I don't think it would be very good to go any longer than summer recess, because that would affect that timetable, and essentially how quick members at that said they wanted that timetable to be.
So I think we're going to move on to 4.2, but Katie, did you have something on that before we move on?
I'm not sure what point it lines in, but it aligns to one of the questions that has previously been brought up, or one of the requests, and that's about looking at all the delegations and where they would sit. Can I ask, will that be done for the outside bodies? Because clearly outside bodies are appointed by full council. However, as someone who sits on the current EEI, I was appointed from full council to certain outside bodies which had to be coming from that EEI. So it's just to put that request or ask, has that been looked at, or will that be looked at? Because obviously that's an issue that will directly affect quite a lot of organisations as well as ourselves.
I think, thanks for raising that point. I think we'll have to note that we'll have to do something about aligning the outside body appointments with the committees once we decide what they are. Thank you.
Yeah, I wondered if Nick wanted to come and say a few words about the meeting he'd had with the supplier on video conferencing, Nick?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was just a quick update to advise members that we'd held a meeting with the suppliers of the audio-visual equipment in the council chamber in relation to upgrades that we could provide to allow for video conferencing. Apparently there are a number of buildings out and about across the region that are on the same wide area network, so that does give us the apologies for getting a bit technical, and it's probably a bit above beyond my IT understanding, but apparently that gives us the flexibility that members could video conference in and link into the system in the council chamber. The suppliers are going off to do a bit of work on that proposal, and they'll be coming back to us with some ideas how we could achieve video conferencing from out and about across the region into the council chamber as a start. I thought members might like to know that we'd held those discussions, and it's looking. The suppliers were quite confident they could do what we needed to do without a massive amount of upheaval, so I think that's quite positive.
I've got Richard, Katie, Willie. Yeah.
And we're going to have the electronic voting at the same time. We've had this for 20 years now, 15 years, and we're still waiting for it.
Well, can we vote on that? I don't know. But just commenting on Willie's, obviously lots of Liberal Democrats don't want centralisation. We believe that areas should be made at the lowest local level. We've had a major review of the area committee system. It's just been up and running for about a year or two, and it needs to be given a chance to flourish. And if we'd made more decisions at local level, then there'd be less need to travel. And when we're looking at the agendas over the past year, we can also look at the items of business which could have been decided at local level. We had a look at that at our group meeting this morning, and we identified a number of things, well, which were to do with the local area and weren't really strategic at all, and it could have been decided at local level.
Right, okay, steady now. Katie, then.
Thank you, Chair. It's on the points raised by Nick, and I mean, I'm very grateful that we're looking into upgrading what we have. However, I'm really concerned that there might be a set of duplication going on here. There's been 6.6 million guaranteed from SOCEP to create digital hubs based in our high schools. So my sort of request is, can we please not spend a lot of money on something that's already happening and already going forward? So can we use our existing facilities? We've already agreed at full council that we're going to have community hubs within our schools. You know, I'm more than happy to go into the high school and use the facilities there, because if they're going to be invested in and we're going to utilise them, why on earth would we be agreeing to spend more money on something that's already been done by another organisation? So it's just to bear that in mind and ask, you know, let's ensure we don't do duplication here, please.
Yeah, certainly we won't be spending any money that we don't need to. You can rest assured there.
Willie?
Yeah, Chair, and I did say I would come in when the frequency of meetings are going. Perhaps, you know, I'm maybe one of the, whether I'm the only dinosaur, I don't believe I am, in terms of all this, what Nick was saying about the video conference, you know, and someone referred to Skyping and all the rest. I still prefer to see the whites of the eyes of individuals. So, you know, and a lot can happen when you actually do get to that. So I'm known, you know, and this idea that you video conference and all the rest, that cuts out, you know, the whole idea of coming together, either as committee or at full council. And I think it was you and I tried one just recently, and it was a total, well, no, a total disaster, but you know, we weren't getting, you know, to whatever we were trying to do on this Skype and whatever it was. So I think we need to be, you know, a lot more in tune, and members need to agree to it. And there are some still people, or dinosaurs as I call it, you know, in terms of that it's maybe no all. In fact, Adam gave me no a lesson, but you should, you know, and thing, but I still can't get it to work. So I can't. So yeah, I think we still got to paper there and all the rest before we even move on to frequencies.
I don't imagine it's going to completely take the place of getting together. I totally get that. Adam?
There's some folk you can't train. Anyway, I mean, you know, no, I mean, I think, you know, it's an important discussion to have, but I think, you know, we have taken that decision at this committee to sort of have a trial, you know. I think, you know, we'll wait with bated breath to see how technology allows us to change how we do committees and things. I think just moving on, the 4.2, the size of committees, certainly, I'm quite happy to go with the recommendation that, you know, members are wish to have sort of committee numbers and quorum numbers included as part of the review, but certainly in the discussion in the Labour group this morning was that actually a membership of 21 for service committees is probably the right number, given as well, you know, there's a number of councillors who will want to be on particular committees because they will, you know, if we going by the decisions we've just taken, they could have quite a substantial number of delegations. I think as well we've had a few discussions certainly over the 2 years that I've been a councillor about, you know, non-aligned members and things. And I think, you know, it's important to make sure that as many councillors as possible get sight of decision making. Where I would quite like the review to focus on is this pick and mix of quorums of subcommittee numbers that we seem to have as outlined in 4.2.2. And I think certainly it would be my view that a quorum of 3 for some decision-making bodies is probably too few. And I think that we would certainly welcome that to be part of the review and maybe some form of standardisation in subcommittees, but quite happy to hear what everyone else thinks about that.
Stephen?
Yeah, thanks again.
Willie was first.
Yeah, well, it's just on the point Adam was making there, and he made reference to non-aligned, and as you know, when the committee proportionality was determined 2 years ago, then as a one non-aligned member, and I was not included in my opinion, in that proportionality on the calculations that were done. And I know that's an issue that's to come to the third of the sequence of meetings in terms of an individual. We are now a grouping that reflects a different proportionality. I maybe should have added there that there was a period when I didn't see this building hardly because I was in no committees other than audit and risk. So in that respect, there was an exclusion. Now it's the very opposite. So it is, and there's so many places it's unbelievable. However, I think we got to look seriously at the numbers and doing to proportionality on an individual basis, and I will make reference to a time when that was the case, dating back to Tom McCaultry, Beth Gordon days, and I'll make that at the third meeting. So I think size has got to be, and proportionality to whatever the situation is, an individual member, so that there is inclusion rather than exclusion.
Stephen?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think there's some things that are set out. I think with local review body, there is certain things that we have to are required to observe in terms of what the local review body subcommittee or size has to be. But I'm not sure about that. Maybe that could be something the officer could respond on. But we're looking at the scope again, just to use that word. But we're not really making recommendations today. So even though the considerations at 4.1. I would say personally, I only really agree with that service committees should align with the new service organisation. Everything after that, I mean, it's a sort of free-for-all really, because we can't really agree anything. It's just a sort of setting a scope. And there's no recommendations until effectively the final meeting of this, which will then make a recommendation to full council. So after, on the third meeting, I think that's the way it's structured. So this is very much a review sort of exercise. So I think we should be, I wouldn't want to sort of pin us down too early. All we're sort of saying is include all these things in what we look at, because clearly there's a lot of different voices here today. So, so I think, yeah, for the 4.1 first bullet point, I mean, by all means, do I agree with the principle? Maybe just the first sentence, to be honest. Everything else is sort of up for grabs, because I think I've already set out, rather than changing yesterday's stuff to fit today, we should be changing today's stuff to fit tomorrow. And the second bullet point, yeah, that seems fair enough. In principle, the last bullet point, I do agree with the removal of the committee, but the problem is there was about 20 or 30 million pounds worth of annual business reportedly there, subsidised or not, that was meant to be getting accounted for with that, and that includes things like I think total facilities management was in there, which is sort of central to how we might be going forward. There was things to do with property services, commercial waste, lots of different things. So it would be helpful if we're just going to remove it, can we be clear about where the mapping of that business, because there was clearly work getting done, where that's been mapped to, because that's almost, not quite by stealth's the wrong sort of connotation, but I mean, we've moved on somewhere else, but it's not clear where all that business has gone, maybe to all members, and I think if we're really discussing this fully, all that information should be in front of us. So, I mean, that would be, but in principle, with the removal of the committee, yes, but I think with qualifications, if you like, because I think we need to see a bit more detail on that, because I mean, I remember sitting on committees where there was business plans ambitiously saying we'd be increasing the revenue profitably sort of to the council, and unfortunately it didn't quite work out like that. But yeah, so we're here to look at the scope. We can't really make recommendations yet, so I wouldn't want to risk going too far too soon.
Thank you, Stephen. And I think Rona's going to pull together what we've captured in the discussions today. So those things will be included. Just anyone more comments? Richard?
Yeah, just to complete our group analysis today, we think the size of 21 for the main committees is fine. The question on making more committees more consistent, we thought, well, that might be a good idea, but if there's no problem with the way things work now, why should we take time to change it at this moment in time? So could we have feedback on whether there are problems with these inconsistencies? We think that the frequency of meetings that obviously should be determined by the amount of business which the council has. It might mean moving from 8-week to 6-week cycle, but perhaps when we're looking at the thing next time we could look at that. I think also agenda management, I think that is an issue, because sometimes you go to the SIPL committee and there's only a couple of items of business and you're finished within an hour, and others you're there till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So agenda management, I think, is an issue for the service directors to try and spread the workload across the year. That might not be possible, but it certainly is an issue. Okay, thank you.
Ivor?
Chair, how do you square 4.2 with 4.3? One's saying that we're struggling to service the committees, and the other one's saying there's too much business on the committees and we want more committees. Now, one has to be right and one has to be wrong. You know, how can you actually achieve both? You know, if we can't service the committees according to 4.21, and then we're saying the business that's on them is too heavy. So if it's too heavy, we need to have more committees. But then we're saying we need to reduce the number of committees, because at 4.21 we can't service them. Now, that's an impossible situation. You either say, fair enough, we'll do away with all committees and we'll have a cabinet system, which personally, that's what this looks like to me. What's cabinet system by the back door? There seems to be right, cut down in the committees, cut down in what's going to committees, and we'll deal with everything behind closed doors, get it sorted out, and then we'll maybe report it to full council at the end of a quarter. That's what this report reads to me. Is that where we're actually heading?
Chair, no, I can assure members, you know, there was no hidden agenda at all in writing this. It was more about getting ideas down to give you a focus for discussion. And in terms of, you know, it just reflects sometimes what we get told, that, you know, that some of the groups are finding it difficult to get members on committees. So therefore, cutting down on the number of members on a committee might help with that. It was just a suggestion, no more than that. And also that if you used, you know, to have more frequent meetings might help people. They don't have as long agenda, so they're only here for the morning or the afternoon rather than all day. And that helps people that maybe got other jobs and businesses to run. And the other point was just considering, should we use subcommittees more? So it wasn't about taking the business, you know, and do it behind the scenes. It was, should we have more focused discussions on the more complex topics at subcommittees, and then maybe only a few members are involved in that who are genuinely interested in that and want to discuss it in depth. So there were only ideas, I can promise that.
Looking at 4.3, I think there's a need to look entirely at frequency of meetings, especially. I think, you know, you could maybe do one solution that's kind of been ruled out by some members here, but not by others. That would mean maybe the frequency of meetings at the moment would be fine. Other options. So I think that's something that we do need to keep in. But I do think that certainly we should look at everything, you know. So we have a summer recess at the moment. I think the only reason why we have that is that's essentially what's happened. And I don't know if there's maybe a need to formally say we have a Christmas recess as well, because we don't actually seem to have one of those. And I believe a couple of years ago there ended up being a meeting between Christmas and New Year, which you know, probably wasn't great for council employees. So I think there's maybe a need to look at that. But also, you know, the days and things, the days for meetings, you know, I know we stick to sort of Tuesday, Thursday, but I know that there's some weeks where I could have committee Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, which isn't great if you've got another job or a business to run. So I think there's a number of things there that we need to think about, you know, so with the timing of meetings, and essentially that I think that we do need to look at, you know, sort of the recess, 4-week recess in summer, absolutely fine, but, you know, is that the only time? You know, because I don't know about other councillors, but certainly have another job, it's very difficult for me to actually fit in, you know, when you actually go on holiday and things, and for the fear of you could end up having a committee that day, you know, so it's something that we should maybe look at while we're addressing all these other points as well.
Probably most of my points I think have been covered, but I think 21 as a number on committee, just going back so clear, have my input. I think you should look at 19, 21, 23. Even, we can do that ourselves now, because I think proportionality is something we have to consider, and considering the current administration structure. I think the rest of it probably has been covered. Maybe a wee bit wider when it comes to should we be using, going back to timings, Adam's just picked up on it, but why Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday predominantly? Why no, sometimes, like, whether you're working, whether you're in business, whether it's a combination of both, why not an even time in a weekend, potentially? I believe we should have a clear time where we didn't have committees unless it's called special. So the recesses, I mean, we are very short, I think, in recess. 4 weeks is so okay for me, but kind of Parliament and such like are much longer, so you ever gets a chance to actually get away. When you come back with your sails full of air, so to speak, and you certainly go again. You get a level of productivity that you've lacked in the run up to the recess, but there's a number of things there. But I think Area Committee certainly could have more, just as a comment, maybe past that point, but certainly should have a different type of workload compared to what they've got at the moment. I think they should. I think that they're withering on the vine with the current structure that's there, and I've mentioned that many times at Area Committees. I think they need to look at new items, ideas. I'm not saying going back to planning. Some folk have actually mentioned that, get that local level of democracy back there, but there's certainly some things you could put back on there.
Thanks, Chair. The bit I was actually looking at, and I don't know if we're working our way through to there or near the end, is the bit about the way we reported in DG1. And, you know, major capital projects affect every single member and every single person in Dumfries and Galloway, because it's their money we're spending. And I personally think we should go down that route that we employed with DG1, the aftermath of DG1, for all these big building construction projects, where it should be reporting not to the Service Committee, because with the best will in the world, some of the officers and people around there don't really, you would be suggesting would, I don't think we've got any chartered engineers or civil engineers in the education service, for example. Right? We might have some in the building, and I just think it actually it gives every member a chance to scrutinise properly, rather than 21 people on something that's affecting everybody in the region.
Chair, I must admit, I think, well, when I first joined back in 1999, right, you had group meetings on your Monday. On a Tuesday it was full committees. Wednesdays were area committees. Thursdays were subcommittees, and Fridays were licensing boards, right? You would have 2 service committees on the Tuesday. One started at 10:30, guaranteed it would be finished for 2 o'clock for the next one starting. We had, I think, about 7 or 8 service committees at the time. The agendas were on the most manageable, other than E&I at the time, which always seems to have a thick tome that comes out. The area committees, you came in here at 10:30 in the morning, and we sat from 10:30 possibly through to 5 o'clock doing planning, licensing. We then went and got a cup of tea or something. You were round to your area committee at night for the local work, the giving out grants and stuff. So you'd be there till 9 o'clock at night. Thursdays you would then have your subcommittees from the full committees. Now, I don't think we are overburdened with the number of what we've got now. If you take on this job, you take it on to do the job. Now, yes, I understand that people have other jobs, but this is nigh on a full-time position. And when I started, we didn't have the luxury of having £16,000 salary every year. You got 6, and you had to live off 6. I had to live off that, plus I had to go and do my work. I'd be out many nights on my tractor having to plough fields at 12 o'clock at night because I had a meeting the next day, and I just had to do it. Now, I decided that that's what I wanted to do. I don't think we do have a badge system. I'm lucky if I'm in here once a month now at a committee. You know, it's just the workload's been taken away. It's going somewhere else. I don't know where it's going. It's not coming in front of members.
How do you follow that? No, but there is a point being made by either, and I was going to make it, because, you know, literally, you know, at times it feels like a 24/7. But, you know, and it's not so much the frequency of meetings, it's that you're included in the business that's important. And Ivor touched on at the end of what he was saying in terms of once a month. Now that's how it felt as an individual non-aligned member. That, you know, it wasn't once a month, it was once every 3 months. And the work was still going on somewhere else, and I was not included. So it's the frequency of meetings. And I think it still needs to be that you know, I can remember back to 1999, I don't think I can, but however, it was, full council met almost every month at that time. And now, you know, it's bi-monthly, and at times I don't feel part of the decision-making process in not being included. So I think it's not the frequency, it's that we do involve members, and that's all the 43 members by whatever system we come up with. And I think that's more important. And that this idea of Skype, and I've said it in video conference, for me, it still needs to be, you know, and it's not about centralisation, it's about getting the proper decision making at the right place, and that we do come together, because I think there's more than me that hasn't fully taken on board this whole IT concept. So I don't think we should exclude those that don't feel a part of that in terms of how the whole thing operates. There are, if people want to use it, they can, you know, quite happily go and do their video and everything else, as long as it's open to all members that they do meet as a committee at the point.
Katie.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back. And again, I didn't think I was going to be adding any more, but it's a point that's just been raised, and that's about our workloads. Now, I was very fortunate to be able to attend the COSLA event back in November last year, where we were looking at how do we achieve gender equality within our local government. Now, while I appreciate that this is not a forum for discussing that, I think if we are looking at timetables, there's important points that need to be arranged or need to be looked at. Generally, people with caring responsibilities, and I'm not just talking about children, I'm talking about older adults as well, generally fall down to women. And we as a council are not gender balanced whatsoever. I mean, we look in the room today by their elected members sitting here. So if we're looking at when meetings are going to be taking place, and equally in terms of the holidays and recesses aligning with the school days perhaps, I think that's something that this committee has the opportunity to perhaps look at. But I would certainly ask officers to perhaps look at the findings from that seminar that was conducted at COSLA, and there has been a report which I've got a copy with. I assume the council would have received a copy, but I'm more than happy to forward that as well. That, you know, there are issues in how we achieve gender equality within our council. So I just wanted to bring that in as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. I think if there are any more comments or discussions about, I think we did come on to 4.5. Adam, and then we'll go to the recommendations.
So, I just wanted to come back to, I think that Ivor gave what was probably a really helpful, straightforward, what used to happen. And I think that sort of my experience at the moment is that, I recall we made a decision that essentially there would be no committees sitting on a Monday afternoon, for example, and here we are. If I don't have a problem with us sitting here for 7 hours conducting the agenda, I think that we had came up with a number of principles, and we probably haven't stuck to those, and that would be my issue. Is that for a number of reasons, not just for those who work, but for those with caring responsibilities, how can we make sure that we have a system or an agenda, a number, whenever we have meetings, to make sure that not necessarily that it fits in people, but people know what to expect. I think that's what we need. Ian sort of mentioned about evening meetings and things like that. Absolutely, I've got absolutely no problem with that. I think we need to have that discussion. Because essentially, actually, that might work in better with a lot of people. Particularly area committees and things like that. I think all these ideas need to be threshed out. But certainly, the angle I was coming at from is that we did agree a set of principles, right? 2 years ago. And actually, even just at this meeting, we're actually breaking those principles. And if you do have a job or you have responsibilities elsewhere, because people might actually have said, right, on Monday afternoons when I can do X, Y, and Z, people need to know what to expect so that they can manage their diary and just make sure that they're available to attend meetings. And that's where I was coming to that. Not that we're too few. I think actually that there's sometimes I'm in here, 3 times a week, and then actually I'm not in for another 2 months. So I think that there is something there that we need to look at, and that's certainly the angle I was coming at was we need to certainly look at and give members an expectation rather than we need to take, we need less meetings because of our workload.
Andy?
Okay, just 2 quick things. One was a comment in the video conferencing situation. I've chaired video conferencing meetings, and there is a real danger that people get excluded. Willie's right. The whites of the eyes at times. It depends on what the meeting is. Right? If the meeting's 3 or 4 people with a planning meeting about a project, yes, brilliant. If it's a 21-member committee and you've got 20 in the room and you're trying to control that meeting and you've got somebody on a video conference at the other end of the region desperately trying to get in, the way they normally do it, Cosler's a perfect example, they jump in over the top of everything else and or they can't get in. So that we need to balance that and make sure we've got a balanced view of what we're doing it for. But the big service committees, the full councils of this world, I would suggest, need to be, if at all possible, in the room so that you have no danger you're excluded. It's a real fear for me, and I'm not against technology in the slightest, but we need to take that into consideration. And the second thing is just picking up on Ivor's point. Ivor's right, but we also changed the system because people then were joining the council. I'm not pigeonholing you hear Ivor, mainly because they could afford to do so, right? We've got, no now, and I know your personal circumstances, and I know what you went through and everything else with the farm and everything. So I think it's more for me, it's a distribution of the workload amongst the political groupings is the problem, right? And how those political groupings actually manage their members. Right? Rather than a full council decision that you take place. Just to finish, see when you said at full council that you were going to open this up to everybody, I'm sitting there thinking, she's awfully brave or awfully daft, right? Because this could have very easily been a rabble, right? Actually, it's a testament to the conversation, the adult conversation in the room. That's not happened today. You've had a really balanced debate amongst each other and civility all round. So congratulations, thank you.
I'm not sure if that was a compliment or not, but I'll take it as one. I'm going to take it as one because that's my prerogative as the chair.
It's
So
the last
thank you,
Tuesday
Andy.
matches you'll ever get in on Saturday night, okay?
I like a challenge. So thank you very much for your comments. I don't think there's any more just now. So if we go to the recommendations and understanding that this is a capturing of the spirit of what was said today. There's some really good points made. So can I ask that we have considered the suggested principles for the review and set out in paragraph 4.1 which will provide an initial focus for committee debate, and that we've considered the points raised at paragraph 4.2 to 4.5, and we've offered views for further development by officers to be discussed at the next 2 scheduled meetings of this subcommittee. And I've got Ian and Willie really quickly.
The heck of the sentiments, Andy, what a good debate it's been, but I just wondered if we could have done a quick resume, just add another 2 minutes on, so we've got the basic principle, in case somebody's got something that we maybe missed or thought we're going through for 4.1, because we've got a question at the end of every paragraph pretty much saying, like, okay, do we agree? I just wondered how it's been captured. That's what I'm thinking. It'll only take us a couple of minutes, Chair.
Willie?
Yeah, Chair, it frightens me that we're talking about evening meetings, no less they are in Stranraer. The whole of every evening meeting. But rather than just a quick resume, if we could get a note of, what has been discussed, and rather than just a resume, it's a note of, what's moving, what's been taken forward, would be better for me.
Are we having when is our next meeting for this? Think of the timelines going back to what with the brigade and the meeting. Are we having a workshop, or is it our next meeting? We'll have like a mini workshop with this committee, and before we have our next meeting, think of the timescale coming back to full council and what we look to recommend, and quite a bit of work we've put there. I think we have to be involved in that as members, probably better in a workshop setting, I would think, but it might have to come back to committee.
We certainly decided that we'd have a subcommittee meeting, but I don't suppose there'd be any harm in we could have a workshop as well. I mean, I'm already thinking maybe 3 meetings isn't enough before full council, that maybe it would benefit from a workshop, maybe just even for the work to look at the schemes of delegation and how they map. That's probably better around a table if we could try and fit that in, and then come to the subcommittee for the decision.
I'd just say, why not have the workshop before the meeting? I mean, that would probably work quite well. It's all fresh in our minds, and maybe streamline the time spent on the meeting.
Chair, and could we have it on a Thursday, because that was when the subcommittee's always here.
I think I might be ploughing my field on Thursday.